Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump vowing to drastically reform FEMA. The remark came while he was surveying hurricane damage in North Carolina. What's in his upcoming executive orders and what has changed during his first 100 hours in office. Communities are coming together to cope with California wildfires and the devastation they've brought with them since breaking out 3 weeks ago. Residents are sharing what they believe President Trump can do to support recovery efforts. Deportation flights started today. White House Press Secretary Carroll Levitt posted photos on X of illegal immigrants being led onto military aircraft. Meanwhile, a New Jersey mayor is speaking out against the immigration enforcement actions. President Trump records a virtual message for March for Life attendees in Washington, D.C. Vice President J.D. Vance and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis speak in person. Jason Blair has more. Republican control in Congress is already taking shape with the approval of the first bill and cabinet nominees. A recap of what happened on the Hill this week.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump is now heading to Los Angeles to address wildfire devastation after surveying hurricane damage in Asheville, North Carolina. He's vowing drastic reforms to FEMA and demanding changes in California. And joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Tell us more about President Trump's trips today.
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So today, President Trump is capping his first week in office with trips to 2 states, both recently hit by disasters. The White House says his trips to a red state and a blue state shows that he's showing up for Americans of all backgrounds. And of course, first he visited Asheville, North Carolina, which was hit by Hurricane Helene back in September. And while there, President Trump says he will sign an executive order to fundamentally start to reform FEMA, if not just getting rid of it. Here's what he said. Watch.
I'd like to see the states take care of disasters. Let the state take care of the tornadoes and the hurricanes and all of the other things that happen. And I think you're going to find it a lot less expensive. You'll do it for less than half, and you're going to get a lot quicker response. FEMA has been a very big disappointment. They cost a tremendous amount of money.
And while there, he also met with families and residents affected by the hurricane. He says he's going to sign a new executive order to slash red tape to help families and local residents rebuild in a much quicker process. Watch.
Today, I'll also be signing an executive order slashing all red tape and bureaucratic barriers and permits to ensure the rapid reconstruction of the roads here in western North Carolina. We're going to go through a permitting process that's called no permitting, just get it done.
And now President Trump is on his way to Los Angeles, and that's as wildfires are continuing to burn through the southern part of California. Meanwhile, Trump today laid out 2 conditions for disaster aid from the federal government to be given to California. One is demanding voter ID to be implemented in California, and second is demanding water to be released. And that comes despite California Governor Gavin Newsom previously saying that there's no single valve that can just let the water flow out. And he also has expressed concerns that President Trump would withhold federal aid from California. And now President Trump is expected to arrive in California in just about an hour. We do expect Governor Gavin Newsom to greet him on a tarmac as well. Back to you.
And Iris, today caps the first week of President Trump's new term in office. What are the key areas that have seen major changes?
Sure. So this afternoon, while on Air Force One on their way to Los Angeles, Press Secretary Carroll Levitt actually briefed reporters in her first formal gaggle, capping the first 100 hours of President Trump's new term in office. And she laid out a few key areas which have seen changes already. First, on the border, she says there has been the arrest of 538 illegal immigrants, and there's also been the first deportation flight using a military aircraft since the Eisenhower era. And the Pentagon asked that more flights will be coming up in the next few weeks, and that also some 500 Marines have also took up positions near the southern border with Mexico, and with more Army soldiers are also on the way. And on the efforts to end DEI after President Trump signed that executive order on Monday, and Target today became the latest big company to retreat on its DEI efforts, and that's after companies like Meta, Walmart, and Amazon have also cut down their DEI efforts. And meanwhile, on government efficiency, Trump's new Department of Government Agency, or Doge, posted on X today saying that hundreds of millions of dollars worth of current or impending federal contracts have been canceled. It says their initial focus is on DEI programs as well as unoccupied buildings. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. Wildfire recovery remains a priority for residents in Southern California as President Trump prepares for a visit later today. NTD's Christina Corona is on the ground in Pasadena, speaking with locals about their thoughts on his visit.
We're here in the city of Pasadena, where hundreds of residents are still recovering from the impact of the devastating wildfires. With President Trump visiting some of the burn areas today in Los Angeles, I spoke to several locals who shared their thoughts on how he can address these ongoing challenges. Day laborers from the Pasadena Community Job Center have gone above and beyond to organize aid for those in need.
For the last 2 weeks, the day laborers of this center have organized a distribution hub where families who have been impacted by the fires and the windstorm can come get water, food, baby materials, hygiene supplies, different things that people need.
They've also set up fire relief brigades. Hundreds of volunteers have taken to the streets of Pasadena and Altadena to clear fallen trees, branches, and debris that blocked roadways after the windstorm. As President Trump visits areas devastated by the wildfires Friday afternoon, local residents share their perspectives on how he can contribute to recovery efforts.
Here, the day laborers welcome President Trump. If he wants to come, the day laborers have their tools. They have gloves for him, they have a rake for him, they have a mask for him to protect him from all the smoke, and we welcome him to come and join our efforts in cleaning up the streets and supporting those families that have been impacted.
From the president's perspective, he needs to actually come here to see not only the destruction areas, but also these large events, that it's all community, that the government's not helping us, and we need government assistance with this because the scale is so large.
And what one volunteer wants President Trump to know.
It's just understanding that we need more firefighters, that we need more water, that we need more tools so that, we don't get into this situation again.
Many donation sites are no longer accepting items because they've reached capacity, but the community remains dedicated to helping those who have lost everything. I spoke with several workers with the Pasadena Job Center who said they don't plan to close this distribution center anytime soon, that they plan to help the residents in need for weeks to come. Reporting from the city of Pasadena, Christina Corona, NTD News.
U.S. military C-17s began deporting illegal immigrants today as President Trump ramps up immigration enforcement. The Pentagon has prepared to send even more troops to the southern border, including members of the Army's 82nd Airborne Division. Meanwhile, a New Jersey mayor speaks out against local immigration enforcement actions. Here's the story.
A U.S. official said 2 military aircraft flew a total of around 160 individuals to Guatemala. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt posted photos on X of migrants in shackles being led onto C-17s. Leavitt added, quote, President Trump is sending a strong and clear message to the entire world. If you illegally enter the United States of America, you will face severe consequences. Trump's executive order on day one instructed the Pentagon to send as many troops as necessary to gain, quote, complete operational control of the southern border of the United States. The Trump administration is expanding fast-track deportation authority nationwide, allowing immigration officers to deport illegal immigrants without needing to appear before a judge. The mayor of Newark, New Jersey, said that his city had been, quote, unlawfully terrorized after federal agents detained multiple people at a local seafood wholesaler yesterday.
People were fingerprinted. Pictures of their IDs and face were taken there. When I got this information, I was appalled, upset, angry that this would happen here in this state, in this country, that this would be allowed.
Mayor Ras Baraka claimed that ICE did not have a warrant to raid the local business. Immigration and Customs Enforcement called yesterday's arrests a targeted enforcement operation. The Newark mayor was a vocal opponent of Trump's immigration policies during the president's first term. Back in 2017, the New Jersey Democrats signed an executive order cementing Newark's status as a so-called sanctuary city. This week, the Justice Department stated that it would investigate state or local officials if they obstruct immigration enforcement.
President Trump and Vice President JD Vance addressed the March for Life rally in Washington, D.C. Trump's talk was a pre-recorded message. Vance spoke in person, making this his first public event since the inauguration. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the story.
Vice President JD Vance and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis were among the big names here in Washington, D.C. at the 52nd annual March for Life.
Here is what you should be asking your elected officials to do on the issue of the sanctity of life. Show courage in defense of the unborn.
The March for Life is Vance's first public appearance since becoming vice president.
The excitement, the passion, the unwavering conviction that every single person here on the National Mall clearly feels. It is deeply moving to me and means more to President Trump and I than I could possibly say.
President Trump also sent a message.
And thank you for turning out once again to show your extraordinary love and compassion for the unborn.
The events kicked off at 11 a.m. with musical performances, followed by speakers, then the official march from the Washington Monument to the Supreme Court over here next to the Capitol building.
So I'm here to support protecting the unborn babies, and so we all came out to show our support.
We're just here to, I guess, represent the pro-life movement, represent really the unborn babies, and try to keep them from being murdered in the womb.
This year's theme is Every Life, Why We March, and there's actually also a West Coast version of this event called the Walk for Life. It happens in San Francisco, and it is scheduled to happen tomorrow. Reporting in Washington, D.C., outside of the Capitol building, Jason Blair, NTD News.
This week, Republicans took control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. The GOP takeover is already taking shape. Congress has already passed its first bill and confirmed the first cabinet members. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, walks us through what happened on the Hill this week.
We gave him a majority of almost nothing. And then I said, to make it tougher on him, let me take 2 or 3 of the people, right? I said, he'll only have to suffer with that for about 3 months. How are they doing, by the way? Are they, is that moving along?
Totally unified.
I said, do you mind if I take this one, that one, and a couple of others? He didn't mind. He can handle it.
On Monday, Republican Congressman Mike Waltz resigned his seat in the House of Representatives to join the Trump administration as the next national security advisor. And in the coming weeks, if confirmed, it is expected that the Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik will also resign her seat to become the next UN ambassador.
As outlined in Article 1, Chapter 1 of the UN Charter, the purpose of the United Nations is to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations based on a shared respect for the principle of equal rights, solve international problems, and harmonize the actions of nations in the attainment of common ends. The UN has not lived up to this founding mission, and we must demand better.
Republican Senator J.D. Vance was sworn in as vice president, and John Husted was appointed to fill his seat. Republican Senator Marco Rubio was confirmed by the Senate to become the next Secretary of State, and Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody was appointed to replace him in the Senate. On the other side of the aisle, House Democrats are united in their opposition of Republican government spending cuts.
House Republicans can no longer hide their intentions from the American people. Their extreme budget plan is out. The House Republican budget plan is a contract against America.
But House Democrats are divided over their party's approach to immigration.
If a person is so much as accused of a crime, if someone wants to point a finger and accuse someone of shoplifting, they will be rounded up and put into a private detention camp and sent out for deportation without a day in court.
Some 46 Democrats broke party line and voted in favor of the Laken-Riley Act.
This will be the first bill signed by the president. Mike Collins did extraordinary work of Georgia. All the Georgia delegation worked so hard on this. This is the right thing to do. It's a really important moment for the country, and it's always good when the right thing is also the popular thing.
On the Senate side, Democrats joined Republicans in confirming John Ratcliffe to be the next director of the CIA. The nomination of Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense did not count with any support from Democrats. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up, Hamas reveals the names of 4 hostages said to be released tomorrow. Meanwhile, Israel plans to keep troops in Lebanon past the ceasefire deadline. Jason Perry reports. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin both say that they're ready to meet as soon as possible. That's as Putin confirms a significant claim often made by Trump. Elon Musk's influence in Europe has caused tensions in the European Parliament, with some members proposing him for the Nobel Peace Prize and others calling for sanctions. David Vives reports from Paris after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Hamas terrorist group has provided the names of 4 hostages said to be released tomorrow. Meanwhile, Israel said they're planning to keep troops in Lebanon past the deadline with its ceasefire with Hezbollah. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
The Hamas terrorist group has released the names of 4 hostages set to be released on Saturday. They are all female Israeli soldiers who were taken hostage during the October 7th attacks. They are Karina Ariev, Daniela Gilboa, Nama Levy, and Liri Albag. Some Tel Aviv residents shared their thoughts on the news.
I hope they are in whatever that can be after, 476 days in good health, as best as possible.
Everyone would like for every one of the hostages to come back in one go, but Hamas is just drawing it out, and we're working with what we can.
And in the meantime, the family members of hostages not set to be released continue to make their voices heard. On Friday, they blocked traffic in Israel and sat at a table set up for the Jewish Sabbath, holding pictures of their loved ones still held in the Gaza Strip, and then set the table on fire. Emergency personnel extinguished the flames without interfering with the demonstration.
We are here to remind the government that the deal cannot include 34 people alone. They must encompass each and every one of the hostages, alive and not alive.
Meanwhile, Israeli troops in southern Lebanon continue clearing the area ahead of their departure from the country, according to the ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah. On Friday, Israel released video showing the destruction of underground tunnels they said were intended to be used by Hezbollah terrorists. They also showed video of a mosque, and parked in a garage connected to it was a truck loaded with weapons and explosives. According to the ceasefire, the Lebanese military is supposed to deploy to southern Lebanon and fully and effectively enforce the agreement. However, Israel said that hasn't happened yet, and Israeli forces will continue their gradual withdrawal process in accordance with the terms of the ceasefire and in full coordination with the United States. This comes as residents have been returning to their homes in southern Lebanon, with Israeli troops still in the country.
In the end, this is our land, these are our people, these are our lands, and this is our country, so we must return to the land.
The fighting between Israel and Hezbollah displaced more than 1.2 million people in Lebanon. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin today saying the Ukraine war might not have started if President Trump had been in power. Trump has often said that he could have prevented the conflict. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest on ending the Ukraine war.
If I were president, it would never have started.
President Trump often claims that Russia would have never invaded Ukraine if Trump would have been in office. Neither Russia nor Ukraine have previously confirmed or denied whether they think that's true. But on Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said this.
I can't disagree with him that if he had been president, if they hadn't stolen victory from him in 2020, the crisis that emerged in Ukraine in 2022 could have been avoided.
Putin made the remarks while responding to a comment Trump made on Thursday night about a possible meeting between the two.
From what I hear, Putin would like to see me, and we'll meet as soon as we can. I'd meet immediately. Every day we don't meet, soldiers are being killed in the battlefield.
Trump says the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has become one of the deadliest since World War II. And Putin now agrees to a meeting with Trump.
We would better meet and have a calm conversation on all issues of interest to both the United States and Russia based on today's realities. We are ready.
And early on Thursday, Trump said this about Russia and China.
We'd like to see denuclearization.
On Friday, a spokesperson for the Kremlin said Russia is open for talks about cutting back on nuclear weapons.
Russia considers it necessary to restart talks on disarmament as soon as possible.
He added that all nuclear capabilities should be taken into account, not just those of the US and Russia. According to the Kremlin, there is no way to negotiate without considering the nuclear weapons of countries like France and the UK. Also on Friday, Trump again said that the Ukraine conflict is ongoing because of high oil prices.
Now, one way to stop it quickly is for OPEC to stop making so much money and to drop the price of oil, because they have it nice and high. And if you have it high, that war's not going to end so easily.
Trump argues that because Russia sells a lot of oil, high oil prices give Moscow the money to finance the fighting in Ukraine. The Kremlin spokesperson on Friday did not agree.
The conflict doesn't depend on oil prices. The conflict is ongoing because of the threat to Russia's national security.
He also blamed the fighting on what he called the refusal by the US and Europe to listen to Russia's security concerns. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
Elon Musk's influence in Europe has sparked tensions in the European Parliament. Some parliament members have proposed awarding Elon Musk the Nobel Peace Prize. Meanwhile, opposing lawmakers are calling on the EU Commission to sanction X and Musk for allegedly undermining democracy. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
According to a report by the media outlet Euractiv, Slovenian MEP Branko Grims nominated Elon Musk for the Nobel Peace Prize, praising his efforts to safeguard free speech and eliminate political censorship on X. The proposition is gaining support from various groups of members of parliament.
I've just co-signed an initiative by another MP proposing to award the Nobel Peace Prize to Elon Musk. We also are considering setting up a special commission to investigate this new censorship that the commission would like to implement on social network, including X. So there are lots of initiatives going on.
Musk interviewed earlier this month Alice Weidel, a member of the German nationalist group AfD, ahead of the February elections. He also strongly criticized UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer for his immigration policies. Meanwhile, 45 lawmakers, mostly from the Socialists, Greens and the left groups, signed a letter urging the EU to sanction X's platform to address foreign election interference.
It's clear that some members of parliament are working to sanction X and that the Commission is taking note that there are controls, investigations, and new statements that are about to be published about it. They are targeting X and other online platforms. For the moment, there's no infringement to the current regulations, but the Meps will do anything they can. They might find a flaw somewhere in the legislation.
The proposition to nominate Musk for the Nobel Peace Prize, as well as the new inquiries into potential censorship by the EU Commission, are part of actions taken by nationalist groups in the EU Parliament, aiming to counter MEPs who accuse Musk of undermining democracy or interfering in electoral processes.
Following last year's European election, the administration of the Commission and Parliament has not yet been finalized, and different parliamentary groups are still in the process of forming alliances. Last week, 43 members of Parliament sent a letter to the President urging them to invite Musk to a plenary session to benefit from his entrepreneurial knowledge and learn from his experience. In other words, Elon Musk has recently been at the center of attention in the European Parliament debates, with some MEPs viewing him as a defender of freedom freedom of speech, while others accuse him of undermining democracy. David Dives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, President Trump plans to take on FEMA as he tours disaster sites. A former California Public Utilities Commissioner joins us to explore how integral FEMA is and whether states can handle disasters on their own. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has the beloved penny in its crosshairs. What is the fate of good old Honest Abe? More on that when we come back. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. The White House confirmed that flights deporting illegal immigrants have started, with 2 flights already arriving in Guatemala. The Trump administration announced it's expanding a fast-track deportation authority nationwide. Trump virtually addressed the 52nd annual March for Life, and Vice President JD Vance spoke at the rally in person in Washington, D.C. They promised that their administration will be pro-family and pro-life. The Hamas terrorist group in Gaza will release 4 Israeli female soldiers tomorrow. They are the second batch of hostages set to be released under the 6-week ceasefire deal. President Trump visited communities in western North Carolina devastated by Hurricane Helene and areas in Los Angeles scorched by wildfires. Trump said he would be signing an executive order to start the process of fundamentally overhauling or getting rid of FEMA. And joining us now to discuss FEMA is Timothy Allen Simon, former Public Utilities Commissioner and Appointments Secretary for California. Thank you so much for joining us. To begin, President Trump said during his press conference that states should fix their own disasters without wasting time on calling FEMA. Now, he says he'd still provide direct federal aid to North Carolina. Why have states for decades turned to FEMA in response to disasters? Are states not able to handle them alone?
Typically not. When disasters hit, usually the state infrastructure, first responder delivery system, in particular the fundamentals like housing, temporary housing for evacuees, become extremely problematic, and they rely upon the federal government and FEMA but as we recall from Hurricane Katrina of 20 years ago, and if we listen to the interviews today out of North Carolina by virtue of Hurricane Helene, clearly FEMA is not delivering at the level that citizens who pay federal taxes expect. And for that reason, I think reform, and I'm not trying to make this partisan, I think reform is a good thing, because as we continue to have these climate-related disasters, no matter what one's view is on climate change and man's contribution to climate change or global warming, the fact is we need more resilience, more evacuation capabilities, but also the ability to come to those that have been devastated by disaster. And I believe that's the message that the president was trying to give.
Now, we do, of course, have 50 states, all with their own economies and levels of efficiency. If FEMA were to shutter, would certain states suffer more in disaster response than others without that federal support, which has built up decades of experience?
I think it depends on the disaster and how it hits. You know, my area of expertise, utilities, one of the things that has to be done after a disaster, whether it's a hurricane or wildfire, is to repair the utility transmission and distribution system so you can bring power not only to the homes but to the industries. Most hospitals have backup power as well as other critical infrastructure locations. So I think it depends upon the states and how the disaster is hit. I, for one, would not eliminate FEMA, but maybe FEMA is more the direct funding source for emergency recovery rather than depending on FEMA to actually operate the recovery. There seems to be consistent complaints here. In fact, there are companies, I was involved with a private equity group that formed a company particularly to supplement FEMA because of its inabilities due to its internal bureaucracy. So clearly the president's onto something here, in that there needs to be reform, there needs to be more efficiency, and maybe this is one of the areas that Doge, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, can take a closer look at.
Now, on that note, will shutting down a federal agency like FEMA be as easy as signing an executive order?
No, it is not. And I think this is one thing the public has to understand. First off, certain departments and or agencies were created by laws. And it would take literally laws to shut them down. And I'm not convinced the president would have the full bipartisan support in Congress, number one. Then number two, you have the employees themselves, and many of them are protected under federal civil service, what the right has referred to as the administrative state or the deep state. But there are protections there. And if we're going to say we operate based on the rule of law, then there should be a certain respect for the law and going through the proper process to amend or eliminate federal agencies.
And given the responses and criticisms, how integral would you say that FEMA is right now to the nation?
I think it's still very important. I mean, again, these disasters are continuing on a regular basis, and there needs to be a federal apparatus that can effectively respond. Maybe that response is through the states. I think what the president was saying is that we want to fund the states to take care of their own because they understand the locality better. But sometimes those instruments or instrumentalities, I should say, of delivery are affected by the very disaster. And that's where the federal government comes in to supplement the state's first response and recovery capabilities. And I think that is the type of messaging that the administration should be giving, rather than what seems to be, and this has happened for many, many years, going back to President Ronald Reagan saying that, government is the problem. Well, government's not always the problem, but government's not sacred to the degree that it can't be reformed, that you can't create greater efficiencies. And I think you'll find agreement on that on both sides of the political aisle.
All right, Timothy Allen Simon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is going after the penny. What is the fate of the humble coin? Here's the story.
Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has the beloved penny in its crosshairs. Doge's official account posted on X, the penny cost over 3 cents to make and cost U.S. taxpayers over $179 million in fiscal year 2023. Many in the comments read this to mean the U.S. may end penny production.
Yay, let's get rid of the penny and then think seriously about getting rid of nickels.
Economics professor Robert Wright says both coins cost taxpayers more to produce than their face value. Wright says ending production wouldn't save much, but would still be a big deal.
It's more of a signaling mechanism, I think. There are lots of little things that cost us that we just don't get rid of, just out of inertia. But when added all together, they start to become significant sums.
The penny has endured numerous attacks over the years. In 1990, Representative Jim Kolb tried to eliminate the penny in cash transactions by introducing the Price Rounding Act. This bill failed to pass the House. Then President Barack Obama attacked the penny in a 2013 Google Plus hangout.
The penny is an example of something that I need legislation for, and frankly, given all the big issues that we have to deal with day in, day out, a lot of times it just doesn't, we're not able to get to it.
A 2024 New York Times piece argued for abolishing the penny, saying the inability to accomplish it has transformed the coin into a symbol of deeper rot. The first penny was created in 1793, featuring Lady Liberty. It went through numerous redesigns over the years. The image changed to a flying eagle in 1856, a Native American in 1859, then to President Abraham Lincoln in 1909.
Coming up in tennis, an injured Novak Djokovic gets booed after exiting the Australian Open. Dave Martin joins us to discuss. A young girl narrowly escapes the Nazi gas chambers thanks to a stolen coat and a recent haircut. Her story as the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz approaches. And the best close-up photography images are revealed in an incredible look at a neighboring galaxy a decade in the making when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on right now, but let's start in tennis as Novak Djokovic was booed last night after retiring from a match due to an injury. What happened to him?
Well, I don't think fans realized he was injured in his previous match against Carlos Alcaraz, though he did have his leg wrapped there. Now, he had a muscle tear in his leg, and after dropping the first set 7-6, that was a long set, nearly 90 minutes. He conceded the match to Alexander Zverev, and that's kind of when the booing started. Now, he said afterward the pain had just gotten worse and worse, and he couldn't take it anymore. So now you have the second-ranked Alexander Zverev will face top-ranked Jannik Sinner for the Australian Open title. But back to Djokovic, that's now 5 straight majors in a row that he has not won. That's his longest drought, actually, since 2010. Now, at the next major, he will be 38 years old. That's the same age Nadal was when he retired this past year. Now, it's just a year younger than Federer was when Federer played his final Grand Slam match. Now, hypothetically speaking, of course, if Djokovic were to retire, which it doesn't sound like he will be, he's already hands down the greatest player of all time. It would still be nice to see him do this one more time, though.
Moving to NFL news, multiple outlets are reporting that the Las Vegas Raiders will hire Pete Carroll to be their head coach. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody else has tried to hire him. He was Seattle's coach for 14 years, won a Super Bowl with them, led them to 10 playoff appearances. He won a national championship at USC at the college level, so he's just one of 3 coaches to win titles at both levels. His specialty is defense. He used to be a defensive coordinator, but he's so good with quarterbacks, too. You know, he had Russell Wilson for all those years, I think 9 Pro Bowls in 10 years with Pete Carroll there. But then he had Geno Smith take over after Wilson was traded. Smith had been kind of a career backup for like 10 years. All of a sudden, he turns into a Pro Bowl performer under Pete Carroll. He's really been really good with quarterbacks. So if this is true, the Raiders really got a good coach here.
Well, elsewhere in the league, Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts was injured in last week's win over the Rams, though he didn't exit the game. What's his status for Sunday?
Yeah, he will play. He's been a full participant at practice the last 2 days, though it sounds like he still has some discomfort in his knee. Now, he said it's progressing, actually. Now, he was tackled awkwardly against the Rams, and it seemed like maybe he didn't quite have the same mobility afterwards. That's a big thing because he's pretty good at running the ball. He had that 44-yard touchdown run earlier in the game, so his health is definitely going to be a factor. Now, they play the Commanders Sunday. The Commanders have that rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels. Daniels was great in that upset win over Detroit, but no rookie quarterback has ever actually led his team to a Super Bowl. 5 have reached the conference championship round, which is where we're at now. Daniels has played very well. It's certainly not out of the question that they win Sunday, though I am picking the Eagles.
Well, in baseball news, the sentencing for Shohei Ohtani's former interpreter, who's being charged with bank fraud, is set for February 6th. What kind of sentence is he looking at?
Yeah, prosecutors are asking for a 57-month sentence plus $17 million restitution to Ohtani, plus $1 million fine to the IRS. Now, yesterday, prosecutors played an audio recording that allegedly captures his former interpreter, this is Mizuhara, impersonating Ohtani on a call with a bank while attempting to transfer $200,000 to a friend, saying this for a car loan. Now, at the end of the call, the woman from the bank asked if there'll be any future wires to this friend, and the person on the other end of the call says possibly. Now, that recording was played as prosecutors asked for that nearly 5-year sentence, as I said. Now, the legal filing says Mizuhara accessed Ohtani's personal account in November of 2021, changed the security protocol so he could authorize wire transfers. But prosecutors have said he did not wager on baseball, which I think is very important for baseball fans anyway. I mean, you don't want to have the league's already most popular player, Ohtani, connected at all to baseball gambling, and that's an automatic boot out of the league. So very important, I think, for the baseball.
Well, Davis Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
Next Monday marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Over 1 million people perished in the Nazi death camp, most of them Jews.
The Auschwitz camp was established by Nazi Germany in occupied Poland as part of Hitler's final solution to exterminate European Jews. In 1944, Agnes Darvas was deported from Hungary to Auschwitz. She narrowly escaped being sent straight to the gas chambers with other children, a fate she attributes to a stolen coat and a recent haircut. Her coat had been taken in the ghetto, and her mother had cut off her braids out of fear of lice. The borrowed coat and makeshift hairstyle made her look older to Josef Mengele, Auschwitz's notorious angel of death, who decided who was fit for labor and who was to be killed.
We were in Auschwitz for a few days, luckily, since we did not even have a bunk. Then they made a selection. If they found someone weak, unable to work, they pulled them out and took them to the gas immediately. But then we did not know this yet.
She and her mother were soon sent to the Plazhov camp to work in a quarry with a pickaxe as heavy as she was.
We had to stand in a bathroom all night, as we later learnt, waiting for an order, whether that group was needed for work or would go to the gas chamber.
Darvas says their clothes were stripped away. They had only the shoes in their hands.
From Mauthausen, we got to Groß-Rosen, and there we got lice. And the lice was big trouble. There was a writing in Auschwitz saying, "Ein Laus macht dein Tod." One lice is your death, and it was true.
But the lice was unavoidable. Her hair and clothes were full of them, and she got typhus too. By the time they reached the Bergen-Belsen extermination camp, Darvas could no longer walk. Typhoid and cholera, caught from filthy water, left her only able to crawl.
There was no water there. There was nothing there. The Germans ran around in confusion. They did not know what to do because the front was quite close. Allegedly, the whole Bergen-Belsen was mined because they did not want those huge numbers of dead corpses to be seen. Every second person died there.
British troops liberated Bergen-Belsen on April 15, 1945. Darvas recalls hearing loudspeakers announcing their freedom. Darvas says the camp was littered with piles of dead bodies, a haunting reminder of the horrors endured there. More than 1.1 million people, most of them Jews, perished at Auschwitz. In 1944 alone, 500,000 Hungarian Jews were murdered in Auschwitz and other Nazi extermination camps. This included all 72 members of Agnes Darvas's extended family, her cousins, aunts, and uncles.
People think that if they remember these, then such things will not happen again. But it does happen day by day. Perhaps it happens not to Jews, but some other ethnicity.
As we reflect on the liberation of Auschwitz and the stories of survivors like Agnes Darvas, we are reminded of the importance of memory and vigilance against the forces of hatred and prejudice. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A mysterious and magical world, normally seen up close only by the brave and bold, is brought into clear focus in an amazing annual contest celebrating close-up photography.
Up close and very, very personal. That's the specialty for a host of incredible artists that make up the winner's circle of the 2024 Close-Up Photographer of the Year competition. In the annual contest's 6th edition, there were over 11,000 entries across 61 countries, highlighting nature's hidden wonders through the exclusive use of close-up, macro, and micro photography. Judged by a jury of photographers, scientists, journalists, and editors, 11 images emerged victorious across multiple categories such as intimate landscape, arachnids, fungi, underwater, and more. All equally fascinating, fantastical, and sometimes frightening. But in the end, it was this cinematic shot named Clash of the Titans of two male stag beetles locked in a ferocious fight over females that brought the coveted Overhaul prize to a photog from Russia who reportedly traveled over 400 miles in dense Russian forest to capture the moment. It's a testament to this breed of artists who will sometimes go very far to get very, very close. Speaking of traveling far to shoot your shot, NASA's Hubble telescope has done just that. And after 10 years of collecting countless deep space images, the agency has released this massive photo mosaic of the nearby Andromeda galaxy. The decade-long project combined approximately 600 separate shots to form one giant high-def view of Andromeda, featuring over 200 million stars, some brighter than our own sun, requiring over 1,000 Hubble orbits to create, and at roughly 2.5 billion pixels of resolution, the gargantuan panoramic mosaic is the largest of its kind.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.